Canelo's billion-dollar gamble, the rider strategy. So, in answering this, there's a few questions that come to mind. What is the billion-dollar gamble? Before we speak about what is the billion-dollar gamble, let me just address a question that I've seen that's been posted online, and that's the question of, is Canelo damaging his legacy? And I'm assuming the question is he damaging his legacy by continuing to box? And I guess maybe we should take a broader approach. Can you damage your legacy by continuing to box? Here's a question. Did Muhammad Ali damage his legacy by continuing to box? I would say objectively the answer to that is no, because he's still seen as the greatest fighter of all time by many. So, and when you think of another, off the top of my head, I think of Evander Holyfield. Did Evander Holyfield damage his legacy by going on too long? Again, I would say no, not really. So when people say continuing too long damages your legacy, I don't know if it damages your legacy, but it might damage you. So clearly, in the context of Muhammad Ali, what an amazing fighter he was. I think about the fights with Sonny Liston, the second fight. The first fight, Sonny Liston was so feared. He was a great champion, very scary. He was like the Mike Tyson of that era. Then you got the Joe Frazier fights. They were fantastic fights. And then you got the fights with George Foreman. That fight was what an amazing spectacle it was. But like I said, he didn't damage his legacy by going on too long. But unfortunately, it damaged his health. And with many fighters, they may not damage their legacy, but they could damage their health. And if it damages your health, then obviously that's something that is detrimental to your personal life, whether it be, having your cognitive abilities intact, but it can also affect your relationship with other people, affect relationship with your family, whether it's your parents, whether it's your siblings, whether it's, having that ability to harvest a positive environment for your children. So when we talk about damage, it's about putting the right context to the word damage. So I don't know, and I don't think Canelo can damage his legacy. I'm trying to think of a circumstance where his legacy will be damaged, but I think his legacy is secured because you've created what you've created. But could he damage his physical health? That's something different. So let's talk about the billion-dollar gamble. What does the billion-dollar gamble mean? For me, I think you can break it down into three elements. Element 1, money. Element 2, control. And element 3, legacy. So that to me would be the billion-dollar gamble. That's what it comprises of. That's the matrix. And then we've got to think about this loss to Crawford. Did that damage his legacy? And I think that's a good question because so many people were expecting Canelo to win. Now, when we think of the Crawford fight, it didn't enhance his legacy, but it created this massive cultural event and it enabled Crawford to go to the highest of the mountaintop. So he was the dance partner, the great dance partner for Crawford. So without Canelo, we don't have that event, and that event had massive cultural significance. Part of that is evidenced by the 41 million people that tuned in to watch it. So again, did it damage his legacy? It didn't enhance his legacy. It didn't enhance his CV from a winning perspective, but it did show his cultural impact in the boxing algorithm and in the boxing atmosphere, for want of a better word. Canelo is still, I think, a global superstar. He is an exciting fighter, and at one point he was a dominant fighter with a fan-friendly style. Now let's talk about Ryder, because here is a leverage play. And when we talk about leverage, it's important to establish what is leverage. If you have leverage, what do you have? Because Ryder isn't just a venue, it's negotiation power. It's negotiation. And also you got this whole thing about market timing. Again, we're combining cash, brand protection, and fewer risky fights, or if we take bigger risks, we get bigger paychecks. And you could argue that Ryder, and this is an assumption, this assumption can be challenged, is an opponent funnel. What do we mean by an opponent funnel? Ryder can manufacture matchups by outbidding everyone. And who does that benefit? Well, clearly that will benefit Canelo. So you have the cultural impact and you have the money. And then we have the whole thing of being being this globalized brand. You can already argue that Canelo is that, but he's a Mexican and an American star. I don't think we could disagree there. But then he becomes more of a global brand. Here's an important thing. If you're looking at it from Canelo's perspective, what is the end goal? How do you win? You could argue that he's already won. He's a superstar. He's created iconic events, iconic moments. He's rich in the ring and rich outside of the ring. But what does the end goal look like now? What is the finish? What is the mountaintop? Is it more money? Is it more titles? Is it a signature fight? Is it some type of retirement setup? I think it's important, right? From my perspective, I feel like we shouldn't just remember Canelo for the losses, because I think like when people are talking about Canelo, they're thinking about, the Floyd Mayweather fight, which is a massive fight, and the Crawford fight, which is a massive fight. But let's not forget that yes, there were these losses that had a massive cultural impact, but also there were the victories, because Canelo's resume, here's a question, and we ask this about every boxer. What's the resume like? It's like going for a job. What is their CV like? And when we look at Canelo's CV or Canelo's resume, I would say it's very impressive when it comes to his victories. You have Amir Khan, really good fighter, so fast, one of the fastest fighters. Miguel Cotto, I would argue Miguel Cotto was an elite fighter. Sergey Kovalev, you have Triple G, everyone feared Triple G, yet he had a trilogy with Triple G. And then you had Billy Joe Saunders, who I contest was a really good fighter. He was awkward and he was a really good southpaw, really difficult to hit. So the CV is impressive. There's no doubt about that. And it's always important to remember that, yes, Canelo has had these significant losses, but he's had these significant victories and he's had this dominance within the boxing ecosystem. So how does the gamble pay off? This final walk for Canelo, I would say you could kind of break it down into 5 elements. So you have Ryder becomes the new Vegas for super fights. So there's that premise. Then you have the next premise, that his brand, and when we're talking about him, who is him, Canelo's brand grows faster globally. And in it growing globally, he's still maintaining that core, which would be Mexico, USA. Then you have, he keeps control even with massive backers involved. And then the next part of that is having the right opponents appear at the right time. And then the final part is that history remembers the wins, not the politics. So I guess what I'm saying here is that the retirement, the successful retirement, the successful play, the billion-dollar gamble is, creating this final stage, this final chapter against a formidable opponent. And you have the potential of this tremendous victory. And like I said, I think it's important to realize that boxers, no matter how rich they are, they do their labor. Like a workman, working on a construction site, they get paid for their labor. And boxers get paid for their labor. When you're at the elite level, they get paid differently. Floyd Mayweather made millions upon millions upon millions upon millions, but he still gave his labor to the sport. And because he wasn't a knockout artist, he had to work those full 12 rounds in most of his fights, as opposed to a Mike Tyson who could, end the fight in a round. And it's always important to remember the service that they've given. that these boxers given, whether it's the service of Evander Holyfield, the service of Lennox Lewis, the service of Sugar Ray Robinson, the service of Rocky Marciano, the service of Larry Holmes, the service of Floyd Mayweather, the labor that they've given. And I think it's important to remember not just the loss that Canelo has had, but also the service that he has given to boxing. What has Canelo given? Here's a question. And I think questions are really good to unravel in the mind and to reach good understanding. What has Canelo brought to boxing? And I think his service to boxing has been exceptional.